Okay, this is a video about the 5 metrics of things that I think musicians notice much more than other people. The first one is span. The second one is speed. The next one is sensitivity. The next one is strength. And the other one is stamina. And so the 5 S's basically are the things that musicians notice much more when they are abnormal than people who aren't musicians. So, for example, if you are looking at your span of your hand, a pianist will be aware if the span of their hand is less than 21 centimeters from here to here. They have small hands, they'll really struggle with ninths and tenths, and they'll find workarounds for that. And they may have to change their repertoire or find other techniques. If you've always had a span that's allowed you to be able to reach a tenth, then you'll suddenly notice if you have a Dupuytren's contracture or some osteoarthritis in your hand, which is reducing your span. You may have osteoarthritis at the base of your thumb or a Dupuytren's contracture in your palm, which is reducing your span, so you can no longer play a tenth. Now, most people working at a computer keyboard or doing any other sort of job, a carpenter, wouldn't notice that small diminution of their span. But musicians will be acutely aware of that and will need that back if they're to reach their previous level of performance. Similarly, in speed, a violinist, etc., everybody's very aware of the need for speed when you're playing music. Any reduction in that speed, for example, if you have some slight flexor tendinitis or some stiffness in your joints, that speed will be reduced and your performance will be impaired. Similarly, sensitivity is really important. If you're a violinist and you need to be able to feel the strings, many musicians play their instruments with their eyes closed. They can feel where they are in space, proprioception as it's called, or they can feel the texture of the strings, the frets, and any reduction in that may impair their performance. And that's quite common in early carpal tunnel syndrome or cubital tunnel syndrome. Carpal tunnel being these 3 fingers, cubital tunnel being these 2 fingers, or any other sort of neurophysiological abnormality. Strength is also important. For example, if a guitarist has to play a bar chord and has to press really hard with the thumb against the back of the neck to be able to prevent fret buzz, then they might notice a reduction in their pinch power. Pianists, of course, drummers, any sort of lack of strength, however subtle, will be noticed very quickly. And stamina, of course. Musicians are aware of whether they can do a 2-hour session or not, and forearm fatigue and tendinitis down here will be very obvious, and any reduction in stamina from 2 hours down to 1.5 hours before they start to fail will be noticed early. So there you have a nice little summary of 5 words which happen to begin with S, of span, speed, sensitivity, strength and stamina, which musicians notice much before anybody else when they are abnormal. And of course they will come to us to see if they can have all of those things returned to normal. And in many cases, the criteria for surgery that we traditionally use would not apply to a musician because the amount of impairment is so subtle that it may not be detectable on imaging, x-rays, neurophysiology, or on clinical examination, but it is noticeable to the musician, and therefore the stakes are much higher. You're trying to intervene for something which isn't very abnormal in the first place, and you're trying to get it back to a very high level of function, and so you have to worry and vex a lot about whether you're doing the right thing intervening at all. And of course, if you're taking on anything with a high risk, such as surgery or even a steroid injection, then you might want to think much more carefully about doing that on somebody who is very close to normal but not quite perfect. So that gives you some idea of some of the areas of difficulty with treating a musician's hand that might be different to treating a non-musician.